Okay, great. Well, I guess let's just start off with a couple of really basic questions. If you could just tell us a little bit about yourself, who's Jorge and what, just, I guess, what your journey is and what are some of the problems that you're passionate about solving?
Sure. Yeah, my name is Jorge. Originally from Peru, South America. I was born and raised in a small town in Peru called Pisco, and then I moved to Lima, that is the capital essentially for college. I studied there biochemistry, and after a few years, I was able to get into grad school at UC Berkeley, where I did my PhD in biophysics, studying. I had multiple projects, but my main project was focused on gene regulation in human cells. So I was deeply interested in studying how regulation can happen within cells and how that leads to more complex, patterns that lead to development and other associated other problems. After that, as I was finishing grad school, I was very interested in essentially exploring how I can use this knowledge in other areas. I was specifically interested in entrepreneurship, in doing a startup. I have heard a lot of things, and I knew there were a lot of startups coming out from Berkeley. So I was thinking whether I can use all the knowledge I learned through grad school to do, something new, something cool, something a bit crazy probably. Was during that time that I went to Singularity, and I met this one as well. We were doing this program called Global Solutions Program, and that's where I met my co-founder. Right after Singularity, we started was our startup right now. It's called Nextbiotics, where we are trying to develop antibiotic alternatives by using bacteriophages. Bacteriophages are these tiny microscopic viruses that are highly specific against bacteria. So that's sort of how, what I'm doing right now. My interests are, anything that is related to biology, learning how things work, learning how you can use, different tools in biology, all the way from enzymes to systems to bacteria to do something good, interesting that, can happen in human lives. So yeah.
Right. Okay. So it's quite a bit to unpack there. So now with Nextbiotics, so what are the biotics? What are the specific problems that you're trying to solve? So I see it was more about kind of like engineering viruses for good, but I guess as someone who isn't very familiar with genetics and and all of that, right? When someone hears virus, right, I guess you kind of automatically think that it's a bad thing. So could you perhaps maybe just elaborate a bit on that?
Sure. So just to give you, I think probably everyone in the room is familiar with antibiotics. Antibiotics are, inherently good. We use them to treat infections and essentially to kill bad bacteria. However, since their discovery in the early 1900s, we have used them, I would even say abused their use in a way that bacteria over time have developed resistance to bacteriophages. And that generates a series of different problems at many different levels. One of the biggest is that, essentially now that you have an antibiotic resistant infection, you treat yourself with one, another, or even a third antibiotic, and they don't work. And many times that lead to deaths. Just to give you some statistics about the States, every year there are over 2 million antibiotic-resistant infections. That leads to around 700,000 deaths. So it's a huge number. Now, if we go a little bit more into the problem, most of the antibiotics are currently used in the agricultural industry. They're used essentially to prevent infections, but that promotes the generation of antibiotic resistance. So what we're trying to do is develop an alternative to antibiotics to prevent infections focusing on animal health first. And the way how we do that is by using bacteriophages. Because, yeah, I guess viruses that kill human cells are, bad. They also cause disease. But if you develop a bacteriophage virus that can kill bacteria instead of humans, that could be something good, because those bacteria are the bacteria that causing problems to humans, right? So that's the idea behind the company. We're using viruses to kill bad bacteria, and therefore replace the use of antibiotics. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So it's kind of using a virus as a vehicle for spreading or preventing infection. Or sorry.
Right. Yeah. So the idea is that instead of using antibiotic to kill the bacteria, we use a virus. The good thing about the viruses that we're using is that they target only bacteria. So you can then use different tools, different molecular biology and synthetic biology tools to engineer the viruses to make them more efficient at killing the bad bacteria, so you don't have to use antibiotics.
Sure. Wow. That seems that seems quite complex, but at the same time could have quite a significant impact in that area. So I guess on that note, you made mention of this briefly earlier about, you kind of wanting to have a startup, like wanting to start your own business. So could you maybe, I guess, knowing what you know now as a founder, what is something that you would, that you would tell yourself, your past self, I guess, when you were thinking about starting this business?
I think being patient sometimes is really important. Sometimes you think, you're doing a startup or it's going to go extremely fast. But sometimes being patient and being super strategic on the things that are most relevant to the company are really important. When I started the startup, I was thinking startup is going to be like a sprint, but it's actually more like a marathon, right? So you always need to have be conscious about how much effort you put into the company, and always have to put up lots of efforts. But at the same time, you have to do it in a way that you can still have some sort of life balance, so you don't get burned out, 6 months after you started the company. The other thing is do something that, where you feel passionate, or that you find deeply interesting, because you are always learning, and that just brings you, even if things don't work, you're going to learn something new, and that's something I really like about what we're doing. It's just the technology and all the things that we have been able to do with the bacteriophages, and even though it's something very biological, you can tweak the system so the bacteriophage can target a different bacteria and be more resistant or be more stable. And all these things, even though, all of them are super important in the technology side. At the end, it's just one more feature of the product. But yes, learning, in the day-to-day and learning from the people that works with you, I think that's super interesting.
Okay. Yeah. So I guess on that note, you make mention of patience. So I wanted to ask, when is I assume, particularly in the area of biology and having to, do quite a bit of experimentation, that, and please do correct me if I'm wrong, that you fail quite often. Is that correct?
Yeah. There's a lot of trial and error for sure. And there is always, you always do optimize experiments, optimize protocols, optimize the bacteriophage that you're working with. Yeah.
Okay. So I guess, on that, my question is, can you give us an example of a time where you really failed? So I guess I'm not referring to this experiment didn't work, let's change something and try it again type thing. More as, I guess, as an entrepreneur or as a founder, a time that you failed and how you bounce back from it.
That's a hard question. I think as an entrepreneur, you're always failing and you're always learning. And it's like, like something that happened to us is that at some point we hired a new scientist. I know the person was fantastic and we really liked that person a lot for a long time. But he wasn't really good at doing the science in the lab. Something that, in one side you feel like, oh, I really like this person. I really like to, to talk to him. But in the other side, it's like, if you don't do the work, you need to be straightforward also with that person and let them know that. And sometimes you try to be nice, but being nice sometimes is not the best way to communicate things. So it took us a long time. A long time is like 6 months. But then at the end, we decided, we need to find someone else that can actually do the job, because at the end, if that person was slowing all of us, down. And that's definitely affecting the productivity of the company and the way how we, the speed at which we can achieve our milestones. Yeah.
Right.
So it's like that. There is a lot of mistakes that you do through the process, and little by little you learn and you try to optimize. Fundraising is another big, I won't say a mistake, but it's, it's a very challenging part of doing a startup as well. Yeah.
Sure. So I guess, bringing someone in that has the skills, and it is also your friend, I guess that kind of applies to anyone, right? Like bringing a friend into a business or someone that you get along with really well is, has its, I guess, pros and cons.
Yeah, that happens a lot. Yes, it's to be really focused on what you want to achieve. You always need to try to bring the right people to help you achieve those goals. Yeah.
Sure. So I guess on that note, what is, I'm sure you've learned a lot over this journey, but if you had to, I guess, identify the biggest lesson you've learned through trial and error through this experience, what do you think it would be?
I guess something that we learn and actually has cost me a little bit of set is that sometimes you just, you need to decide at some point you need to decide that, things are good enough, and then you just have to move into the next step. I think this, for example, we were working with these bacteriophages, these viruses, and then we were killing around 92% of all the bacteria that we were supposed to kill. I wanted to further improve the cocktail and further improve the phages that we had in the lab, but as we were doing that, we were realizing that we were not doing a lot of progress. It's just because you need to do a lot of experiments and a lot of science to do the improvement. But then, as we were talking with our customers, we realized that 92% was already really, really good for them, and it was more superior than other alternatives that they were using in the market. So at that point, we realized, maybe it's not perfect, but it's good enough. We can start using that to do some testing with them, getting some external validation, and then just moving the company forward, right? Because at the end of the day, this knowledge is a key part of the company, but at the end of the day, you need to have a product that you can sell and that can be used to solve a problem. So making the transition was something that it took me a long time to realize, I guess.
So it'd be, so I guess what I'm understanding from that is, you wanted it to be 100%. You were kind of striving towards achieving, a better result, and then you kind of do you think you lost sight of the fact, perhaps for a minute there, that you had already delivered something that was, superior to what was already available in the market?
Yeah. So the product that we have, or that we have now, is, or at that point was like 92%, had an efficiency of 92%, let's say. We thought that we would have to develop something that was 100% efficient in order for us to be able to sell it in the market, or to start doing testing. But then we realized that was not the case. that 92% was already pretty efficient, and it could actually solve a lot of the problems that our customers have. So it's just realizing about those things, just thinking that maybe developing a product with 100% efficiency would have taken us another 8 to 12 months, but with the 90% product, we already had something that we can test and that we can validate. And obviously, once we talk with the customers, they say, yeah, 92% is fantastic. And then as we continue talking with them, saying, like, this is our beta product, we are still developing something that's going to be even better than that. So that was fantastic. That was like great news for the customer, because they, oh no, it's already working really well, and you are going to give me something that is going to be 96, 97%. It's going to be even better. So it's just realizing those things sometimes takes quite some time.
Yeah, right. So I guess it also gave you room to improve as well. Like it gave you room to keep delivering to those customers.
Yeah, that's true as well. Yeah.
That's great. Okay. So I'll just ask you, I think, one more question before I open it up to the rest of the cohort. So you'll have noticed we've got Jennifer and also Grace on the line now as well, part of our cohort.
Yeah.
So I guess my question is, since we kind of spoke about work-life balance earlier. So all of these guys right now are in a position where they're, kind of, some of them are a bit early stage and some of them are a bit more advanced, but all of them have the same issue, which is, work-life balance, right? How do you balance, the needs and demands of your life, of your personal life with the ones from your professional life? So could you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, I think it's always good to have a group of friends, with whom you do something very different from the startup. That's one thing I really enjoy. I have friends with who, I go on the weekends, and sometimes I bike, sometimes we just go and walk and have beer, something like that. But it's really cool because, you talk about very different stuff, and, sometimes it's good because, they are outside of all the problems that are happening with the startup, so they can even share with you something very different, and sometimes they can just listen to you, when you have a problem and give you feedback. And the other thing I do think is very important, I think it's really hard sometimes to figure out the right way to do this, is to have people in the startup that, they are not only your employees, but they are also in some way your friend. Your friends, but at the same time, they need to be, you always need to be able to learn from them. So there is, right now we have 5 people in the company. Each of them has, most of them are scientists, but each of them has a very specific way how he sees things sometimes. And, just by talking to them, you're always learning about things, and they are always have, different interests as well. That, it's just nice ways to think about stuff.
Okay.
So
I'm good. Sorry, I'm going to pop in a couple more questions, I think, before we open to the cohort. I think I made that call a bit too early. What's one of your best memories from this journey as an entrepreneur, as a founder?
There are a few. I mean, just seeing the progress that we have made, and when we started, it was me and my co-founder, and we were super scrappy. We have a small lab in San Francisco, and then just remembering we having to move all the stuff to the lab, and then doing things there, and then going for dinner after that. Things like that were really interesting. And then the same happened sort of last year when we got our first check. Well, our pre-seed round that allows us to move into a bigger space, and we hired more people, and they became really good scientists and pretty good friends as well. And they've been helping us a lot with developing the company, but also supporting with ideas and helping us in many different ways. So it's just, I think for me, it's always like the best experience so far has been, bringing people into the company, just sharing time with them, going for beers, or doing things together. I think that's been one of the best things. Yeah.
Okay. What's one of what's one of the most important decisions you've had to make as a founder?
I think hiring people is probably one. I think there are two decisions that are really important. The first one is the direction. What do you want to do? What product you want to develop, or what technology you want to use? So that's it's really, really more strategic, or where do you see the company moving forward? What's the first product you want to develop, and what are the characteristics that the product has to have? So that's extremely difficult because, as you talk with, investors have a very clear opinion of what they want to see in a product, or what's the things that they would like to see. Customers have a very different opinions sometimes, and even between customers, each of them has its own set of parameters that they would like to see in a product. So deciding what's the what's the set of parameters that you want to develop for your product is probably one of the hardest things. And then as you're executing, that vision is hiring the right people. Hiring the right people with the right set of skills. Yeah.
Okay. Do you think that there are, what are the top 5 things that you think a founder needs in order to function?
I mean, obviously you need to enjoy what you're doing. Doing a startup is really, really hard. So if you don't enjoy what you're doing, it's gonna be really hard. It's gonna make doing a startup really hard, especially not during the first month, but as you continue doing the startup over and over again, and you continue to grow, and if you're not enjoying what you're doing now, that's not gonna work. Second, have some sort of what they call advantage, unfair advantage. So if you don't have some sort of technology or some sort of insight, very unique insight about the company, you're probably not gonna do something big enough, or something that is gonna attract either investors, or scientists, or people into the team, right? For example, for us, we are developing antibiotic alternatives, and we know it's really hard to develop antibiotics, but at the same time, we know that if we become successful, that's going to have a potentially very huge impact in the world, in the way how we treat infections, and in the way how how we manage antibiotics, and how we manage this problem, the antibiotic resistant problem. So I think that's super important as well. Again, it's just hiring people that you enjoy working with and that you like, because at the end of the day, you're going to spend so much time with them that if that's not the case, it's going to be, that's definitely going to affect your working relationship, the way how you share information, the way how you try to, you move things forward. Yeah, those are like 3. Yeah. Hope that was helpful.
Yeah, no, of course, that's fine. I think 5 was a bit much to ask anyway, now on second thought. What's a really great piece of advice that you've been given, and that you feel really resonated with you and really helped you?
Something that I once was told is like, do the hardest things first. And sometimes it's really hard to, Because when you're doing startup, there are so many things that you have to do. Sometimes you need to just take a pause and then really think through and identify what's the hardest things, what are the hardest things. Because many times, and one of the examples that they gave me is like, let's say you make your, and this is obviously not a startup, but let's say you're opening a restaurant and you probably can be the best cook in the world, but cooking is probably not the hardest part. The hardest part is people knowing that you are that person. People knowing in San Francisco or wherever that you're the best person that makes like Korean food, let's say. So, communicating sometimes is really, really hard. Communicating knowledge, communicating that you have a better product is sometimes really hard. And, that's probably marketing and things like that. But identifying what are the hardest things that you have to prove and then making sure that they work is super important. Yeah.
Sure. Okay, well, I guess we'll open it up to the cohort now. So, hello, Leon. Oh, okay, here we go. Question number 1. This is Jacques.
Hi, I'm Jacques. Nice to meet you. Thanks.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, looks. Congratulations for what you've done so far. My question is about, obviously, your company is having a overall purpose and mission around, saving life, using different ways of, engineering antibiotics or new generation. How do you see yourself in the future balancing your mission and the search for profit? Because if you're looking at the typical healthcare company, Novartis or GSK or other companies, spending a lot of money on R&D and trying to find new ways to cure illness, and so with a kind of a social impact, and then looking for profit at the same time. Where do you see yourself on that angle? How do you see your company moving toward that?
Yeah. So, for example, that's a great question. At the beginning, when we started the company, we were thinking on developing new antibiotics or antibiotics that we could use for human use. And that's and doing the science. I think the science could work, but the hardest part about that is not the science, but it's the business model behind it. And the thing is that because the veterinary system is such a big problem, the way how hospitals or doctors structure the way how they give you new antibiotics is not good for new antibiotics. And this is because usually when you have an infection, they give you like a first line of antibiotics, which are usually cheap, like amoxicillin, for example. And if they don't work, they will give you a stronger antibiotic that is usually more expensive. And then once they have used all possible alternatives, they're going to go into the new antibiotics. But that's essentially what generates is that the market that you're going to have is very, very small. So it took us a long time to realize that. After we realized that was the case, and that was going to be really hard for us to make a business selling antibiotics to humans, we say, where else can we use our technology? As we were doing that exercise, we realized that most of the antibiotics are currently used in agriculture. So around 80% of antibiotics are used every year using agriculture. So that's when we realized that can be a potential market. And it's just learning that, right? It's learning how you can use the technology and what's probably the best market. Even though it's not the most sexiest market at the beginning, it's probably where you can, most of the antibiotics are used, but it's also where you can have the strongest effect as time goes on. And that's exactly what we're doing now. We're trying to develop antibiotic alternatives for animals, for animal health. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Questions?
Yeah, I have questions. Here's a question. So how do you manage your, and I know you're co-founder, so I'm just like, this is why I'm asking this thing. How do you manage, like finding a co-founder? What do you look for in a co-founder? How do you manage that relationship? How do you talk about like, sharing equity and those kind of things? Like, framework that you think useful, or even just like rules of thumb stuff?
Yeah. Well, I guess finding a co-founder is probably one of the hardest things that, I mean, if you're lucky, you just met a, really smart, great person as you are going to grad school, as you are, in your current work and things like that. That would be the best way to do it, and probably the most organic way as well. Because it's not like you are interested in starting a company. It's more like you get along well, and then you learn from the other person. In my case, I met my co-founder. Her name is Marisol, as we were going through Singularity. And Singularity was like, it's a very initial environment. It's a great environment. It's very initial in the sense that you come together to learn about exponential technologies, but at the same time, you come with the idea of doing something after you go to the program. So in some way, we have a great group of people that were already, they already knew that they wanted to do something new. So it was easier for us to meet great people, to meet people with very different set of expertise, and to know that they wanted to do something. So that really helped me in the process. What do you look in a co-founder? I'll say first, ideally they need to be complementary to you at many different levels. So first, have a different set of skills. Like, I am a scientist. She comes from a business background. Obviously, I can learn to do business, but it's going to take me so long. And obviously, there is a different mindset, that different things you have to have in order to make that to work. So you have a co-founder that already knows all those things. It's going to make your life a lot easier, and it's going to allow you also to focus on the things that you're really good at. Second thing is people with different perspectives as well is important, because if let's say you have two people with different sets of skills, but you always start thinking the same, many times you're going to be right, but many times you're going to be wrong, and nobody's going to tell you that you are wrong, right? So I think in the long term, that's going to decrease your chances of success. And I guess the final thing, which is super important as well, is just have a co-founder with who you get along well. I had a couple people who were starting a company, and they're saying, "Yeah, I want to start a company with this person, and even though I don't get along well with that person, I think that's a super smart person, and have all these abilities, and I think that's gonna allow me to be successful as having this startup." And that, I think that in the short term, 2-3 months, you can probably make that work. But you're doing a startup, doing a startup takes a very long time. Right? Most of it becomes successful take 10 years to either get acquired or do like an IPO, right? So 7-10 years is a long time. So you need to find a person that, with who you can get along well, very well, I would say. Yeah, hopefully that.
Yeah, it definitely does. Thanks for sharing that. Any questions from you guys, or Grace, or you guys online? You have a question?
Oh, one second, we can't hear you.
We can hear you.
Yeah, sorry, Grace, you were on mute.
You're on mute.
No, you're unmuted now. We can hear you now.
Yeah, I have a question. Yes, so I was looking at the website. It seems like an ambitious project or business. And given that this business is about health and drugs or whatever, won't the approvals to go through this, like, I don't know, FDA, the US or something, it takes time. And obviously, it will take a while before you see a return on your investment, if any. What motivates you to keep on going with it? Because I think it's an ambitious when I think you're gonna go against big pharmaceutical companies who are manufacturing the antibiotics, they need to. So very ambitious, but yeah. How do you maintain the motivation to continue, the inspiration?
Yeah, something I learned over the last couple of years is that you have to do usually ambitious, crazy ideas are the ones that, I mean, I agree with you. Many times they don't work, but those are the type of ideas that if they work, they're going to make a big company. And you know, you can see all the big companies that have either IPO or you know, they're active or they're growing really fast. They have a really ambitious, really great idea behind them. I do think that FDA is a regulatory barrier that we have to overcome. In our specific case, we are not developing new therapeutics or new antibiotics that we can use in humans. So that sort of helps us with the regulatory process. In our case, we have to do something called GRAS approval. And GRAS stands for Generally Regarding as Safe. I mean, probably that's too technical, but that's a process that usually takes like a year and a half. And that's, even though it sounds long, it's way shorter than the time it will take to develop a new drug. That will be from 5 to 7 years. So I'm okay taking that risk. I know if the product works and if the product gets approved, there's going to be a lot of producers that are going to be interested in using our product, and that gives me enough confidence. And something just to another perspective that probably is interesting to share is that, you know, when we go and talk with investors, we share with them, our potential market is $7-8 million, and many times they think that's not big enough. So sometimes you have to aim for a big idea that has a potential market that is, I mean, for them, they want to see $20-40 million or more, and then they say, oh yeah, that's a big idea, right? Taking risks is okay. I guess that's why we're doing a startup. They say that 1 in 10 startups that get to seed round usually end up making profits, but if they work, they're gonna make enough money that everybody's gonna be happy, or at least everybody who's part of the startup is gonna be happy, and the investors as well. Yeah.
Any thoughts on that, Jennifer, or any other questions? Okay. All right, we've got another question from Jacques here.
Another question. What I'm interested to know is, obviously, what you're doing is very risky in terms of outcome. And obviously there is already some, incumbents that are very well known in the market, like top, normal, I guess, pharmaceutical companies. How did you get to convince investors? Have you raised money currently?
Yeah, we have raised 800K so far.
Well, congratulations. And so how did you convince those guys that you guys could deliver on that, knowing that there is the fact that the product needs to be developed and then you have to get the product approved. So there's a lot of regulation around that. So it's even more layers than if you were to build like a normal tech product,
Yeah.
How did you do that?
I mean, that's a hard question. It's really hard to know what VCs are actually thinking whenever you meet with them. But something that I have realized is that you need to be able to convince them that you can do. You need to be able to convince them first that you can do it, at least be able to do enough to get to the next stage. And what I mean by that is like, obviously it's going to take millions and millions of dollars to be able to make this company a reality and to make it profitable, right? But if you think about the whole process, you can divide it in several steps. When we first started the company, we said, okay, we have these stages, we can use synthetic biology and we can engineer them. And that allows us to get our first check. It was only 100K. And that allows us to prove that what we said at the beginning, we could do it. After we were able to achieve this first sort of milestone, we needed more money to be able to develop, not to be able to do it once, but to be able to do it as a platform. So develop sort of like a platform technology. And then we raised, you know, like 600K more. And that allows us to go for the next year and say, yeah, we can do it. We did some pilots, we did some initial testing that, you know, things are actually working, not only in the lab, but also with customers. So we are at that point now. We have been able to demonstrate that, you know, we can develop these viruses, that they're efficient, and that they work with for our customers. So right now we are raising not to develop the technology anymore, but to say, okay, we can take it through regulation, we can have the product approved, and we get the product gets approved, probably a lot of people are going to buy it. So it's always like a process, like, and then obviously if we say at the beginning, oh, we're going to raise $20 million to develop this product to market, it's going to be, there's a lot of risks and there's a lot of money involved. So it's going to be really hard for somebody to give us that amount of money. But if you divide, you know, the processing in smaller steps, and you also need less money, and you have enough time to prove that to be true. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. And then, but you still have to, well, even if you break it down into like steps, if you think about the investor giving you money, as okay, you're gonna do first step one, and you manage to get step one. There is, if you fail after step two, there is nothing they can get back from the investment. So how do you, because you kind of think, vision, I'm just waiting for step one, I can trigger, I can improve it, give me some money. Yeah.
Well, but that's, I mean, from investor side, that's okay, right? Because that's how things work. They don't do, if they will be doing like a single bet in a single company, probably see the model will not work. But if they do 20 investments throughout the year, and then one or two of those companies work, then those companies are going to pay back all the money that they have invested, and probably a lot more than that. So yes, it's just how you know, obviously different investors at different stages tolerate more or less risk. Usually for seed rounds, they say, yeah, probably 20 companies is probably going to be successful, but when you get to a Series A, their numbers are different, right? They're in the one of those 3 companies are going to be successful. And obviously, the first people that put money in the company, they're going to give you like, you know, 100K to 100K, whereas as you move into later rounds, they're going to give you a lot more money, like, you know, $2-3 million per check. Yeah. So, I mean, they have already, you know, they are also really smart people, and they have already made it math, so they know what they are in, right? And they know that most of the companies are going to fail, and it's okay for them. Obviously, that's something that you also have to understand from your side, and you need to be okay with that. You need to be okay taking that risk. Many times, especially my parents tell me, oh, you know, you should start a regular business where you have a cash flow within a couple of months. So but you know, obviously that's a very different game, right? It's probably a lot more safe, but you know, obviously the outcome that you can get is very different, or the rewards you can get are very different. So yeah, you just need to be comfortable with the decisions that you take.
Thank you.
I have a question. So recently, I'm guessing you've heard of it. There's been like a docuseries released by Netflix where genetic engineering is heavily discussed, and there's a lot about like, I guess, number one, startups trying to you know, and again, engineer genes for, you know, for to cure chronic diseases, other hereditary diseases and the like. And I guess they're depicted as being a bit scrappy and as being perhaps, you know, by extension, less legitimate, if you will, or less, how can I put it, like less official as, for example, a large pharma company doing the exact same development in-house. How do you, I guess, what are your feelings about that?
So there is, I think you're referring to this sort of new movement called sort of biohacking. Is that correct, or is?
Yeah, so yeah. It's smaller startups who don't have the resources, for example, to test on animals or, you know, that test on themselves, or they do test on animals themselves. But I guess what I'm getting at is these smaller, smaller startup type labs, you know, out of garages or homes, as opposed to, you know, labs that are funded by a large company.
Yeah. So, for example, I mean, for example, we are a small startup, but we have a lab, and we're working sort of like you know, if you compare our lab to an academic lab, it would look very similar. Obviously, our equipment is not brand new, but we do things following obviously all the regulations that we have to follow, and that's super important because, you know, I work almost every day in the lab, so it's also my safety, right? There is obviously these people that are trying to do things, I would say, almost in a rebellious way. They want to do things by their own. Usually people that don't have a lot of training, you know, it's people that say, oh, I'm just going to do biology, and think biology is cool. But the truth behind that is that it's usually really, really hard to make something to work. And there is a lot of truth behind people saying, yeah, the cost of DNA or the cost of synthesizing DNA or the cost of getting a CRISPR plasmid is a lot cheaper now. But in order to create things that actually work, you need a lot of capital. And that's why you need investment. Without investment, we could have done very, very minimal things. And that's why, unfortunately, drugs, like new novel drugs, cost so much. It's just because there is a lot of money they have to put into research and development before you can have a product that, you know, approved, that you know it works. So yeah, I'm a little scared about some people that do biohacking or that claim that do biohacking, because it gives a negative perception of a small startup sometimes. Yeah.
Sure. And I guess that's it for me. Anybody else have any questions? Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Jorge. It's much appreciated. And it's definitely a great time getting to learn more about what you're doing. I think it's really exciting and really important work, but you've also got a lot of work ahead of you. So good luck.
Thank you. Yeah, well, it's really nice to share a little bit about what I do with you guys, and hopefully it was helpful. Yeah, let's keep in touch.